Hey, what's up, internet fellow nerds? It's the Stillfleet Studio here. We have Wythe Marschall. I'm just kind of hanging out, and the stars of the show are Ethan Gouldini and Anthony Grasso, two artists, pro artists, and we're here as usual every other week to talk about illustrating and designing TTRPGs, mostly, but also monsters, but really whatever you guys want to talk about. Hey, what's up, Tony and Ethan?
You
Hi. What's up, chumps?
And once
How
again, we're
y'all
using
doing?
Magma. Is that right? Magma.
Yeah.
magma. It's like a joint Photoshop Chrome something or other.
And we like Magma. Is that right?
We do, overall, like until such a day as they wind up doing something a little, uh, crypto-y. I think pretty good so far.
Cool.
Make your
Well,
first
if
NFTs on Magma. Not
Yeah,
sponsored,
exactly.
not sponsored, but
Oh, when Adobe, I feel like I spend about a good 15 to 20% of the show just shitting on Adobe, a product that I subscribe to and use every day of my life. But the day that they put in the mint NFT button, I was just like, oh, it's Jover. It's
wow.
Jover, you guys.
Yeah. Well, if folks want to try it out themselves, it's magma.com, so super easy to remember. And yeah, it does look easy to use. I have not actually used it myself, even though I do like to doodle. But I think the last time I saw it was a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, when y'all introduced it to me. So yeah, do the two of you want to do any short what's ups, updates, or thoughts on what you're going to draw today?
Yeah, I mean, since I'm sort of sprinting to the finish line, doing a bunch of the environmentals for Danse Macabre, the hot new RPG coming out from Stillfleet Studio. I'm squarely in Locationville, brain wise. I'm just like, I'm thinking in shipwreck. I'm thinking in space. I'm thinking in like location. I was just thinking about thinking. God, Ethan. Yeah. Um, just thinking about like it's interesting. I think drawing wise, and correct me if I'm wrong. With this, I think like a lot of endeavors are like this. When you start like doing something like concertedly for a while, like I don't know, it's almost sort of like for a while afterwards, everything starts happening in that category. Like
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
been walking around looking at tiles on the sidewalk, and I'm like, yeah, that's like a map of Constantinople, or like looking at the forest, like that could be a location shot.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we just finished running. So Chris Pickett, the creator, and I finished running a four-part game at campaign mini campaign at 20-sided store in Williamsburg. Shout out to Lauren Blanco, the owner, who's really cool and runs indie RPGs. So lets indie RPG companies kind of showcase their work there. It's a really cool store in the heart of Brooklyn, and it's fun because we spent a lot of time planning this epic two table, but like one big adventure, campaign. And mine was all about some cultist monks who are they make cheese to sell. That's how they like run the monastery. But really, they're making like zombie hands and feet as monsters. And they ship them in the cheese. They're like terrorists. And it was rad. It was just like I became really obsessed for like a week by the end with just like medieval cheese making and like the saltiness of different kinds of Turkish and Greek cheeses. So I totally feel you. Once you go down a certain rabbit hole and you're actually doing well, it's almost like harder. Like it's easier to pull out if you're like, this sucks. I'm just gonna have them fight like a goblin. But if you're like, no, they love the cheese monks. Like they're into it. They found a Dracula and killed him. All the shit. So you're like, okay, this is working really well. So yeah, I totally feel the obsession. And that's one of the fun things about expanding and doing more games is we have to sort of do these weird hard 90-degree tilts where it's like, okay, now we're in the far future. Now we're in a dream. Now we're in, an alternate fantasy land with magic. And I don't
yeah.
know, as a writer, it's fun, but there's certain ways to kind of do that. I don't know, Tony, if you have thoughts on like as an artist, how do you transition from project to project? Because I know you're working on a couple kind of zombie projects as well as very different like Blister Critters and your sort of sleep dream kid projects. So these kind of like cartoony, like more kid friendly and like very not kid friendly zombies, very different
Yeah.
things to illustrate, right?
It's there are times where I think it's difficult, but I don't know if it's ever like in a super conscious way. I think like my creative like drive kind of wanders, and I think I'm fortunate in that I am able to work on so many different projects that have such different like styles and tastes to them. That let me go. I am feeling like I want to draw a bunch of like gore and skeletons this week. I'm going to work on the zombie stuff. And then there's weeks where I'm like, I really just want to draw like a bunch of cartoon animals smacking each other like with pencils. I'm going to work on. So I'm able to follow and go where I want. And then in the case where it's not my game or it's not the thing that like I'm in charge of, it's even more freeing because I'm almost being told where my brain needs to be. And then I'm able to just like in the case where I'm starting to do some of the layout stuff for SK, like that's very different tonally from the stuff I'm doing for Danse Macabre. And I don't know, getting to explore both and kind of to Ethan's point of like getting kind of lost in some of the different things that I'm like researching or looking at or like just like thinking about and having that impact my kind of day-to-day creative like brain and processing of the world around me. I don't know. I enjoy it. I would say there's maybe times where it's like kind of overwhelming, but I think for the most part, um, I don't think I would prefer to have one thing. Like I don't think I'd prefer to do just Blister Critters every day, all the time. I definitely prefer having, multiple lanes to drive in.
Well, with that, what lane are the two of you driving in right now? This is a question for the room. What the hell are we looking at? It's cool. I'll preface with that.
It's cool. Well, what is it?
But yeah. Any context you want to add for just like what we started drawing today, Sunday, August 17th?
Apropos of nothing. Yeah, I was thinking the other day about one of my very very particular obsessions is like places character and like beyond literarily like you know the objective correlative like oh yeah the sea is this emotions. It's like you get into the metaphorical like no I mean literally the ocean is this emotions. Like that's honestly like one of the real simple answers to fantasy is like just be obtusely literal about things. But there's so many examples of in classic gaming and in fantasy in general about like places, person, and like one of the biggest examples I'm sure like across genre is like mecha, where it's like yeah, it's a big guy fighting. We know how to draw people, we know how to draw robots, but this is a giant robot. But like there's a whole case to be made at least mentally when I sometimes will just like race through categories just as a personal exercise about like what does this fit into. And you get into this weird sort of thing where, and this is partly where like the ideas about the magic system for SK came from, where it's sort of like you can't fit reality into categories. It's not possible. Like when you start doing a toy model of the world, like in games, categories break down. And like that space where they start getting weird is really great for fantasy because sometimes it can be befuddling or charming or topsy-turvy, and sometimes it can be really grotesque and weird. So I've been thinking a lot about like, an automaton versus a person, or like, how big does it have to be before it starts reading, or like how abstract does it have to be before it starts reading as like a place. So I'm sort of messing around with that right now.
Yeah, I think I started the session just trying to copy whatever Ethan was doing, and now I'm just doodling in the corners.
I like this little guy here.
Oh, rat goblin.
Little rat goblin. I think that's what the kids call a scrungle.
Oh, a scrungle indeed. I've been wondering about this word. So we're meeting
like
a
an appealing, like hot, or like you really love, like a real dirtbag rat fang little gremlin goblin. You're just like there's just something about it's scrungling. It's doing it.
It's doing a scrungle. It sounds like a thing that you do in tech when you get a group of engineers together to do a job. You go into a scrungle.
Yeah, hit your daily scrungle quota.
Yeah, exactly.
If you don't get protein chips. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it'd be fun at some point to figure out some way to do this where we are like doing, illustrations that are linked or somehow in the same world or servicing the same eventual like product, right? Or like whatever, like game need.
Yeah.
I realize we keep sort of not doing that, and it's more freeform. So it maybe one is more fun than the other, but it would be an interesting challenge to sort of copy each other, like you said, or do something like that. Yeah.
If we ahead of time chose the same brush with different colors, or we chose the same brush size with different, like, I feel like if we coordinate ahead of time a little bit, we'll be able to, like, work on the same thing in the same universe. I think we were doing that a little bit before. I think by the end of the session, I started doing the undercoloration. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Right there. I'm gonna reduce my brush size. Oh,
we can make little dudes to go on the that'll slot into the SK, little marginalia things.
Marginalia dudes.
Yeah. So we were just talking about doing a printed version of the Sometimes Kingdom RPG, which you can get currently still free because we didn't add pre-gens and encounters pending discussion of the zine. So at some point, maybe we'll add those, make it not free. Maybe we'll just pull it, Ethan. I don't know, until as long as we have the zines a-going. And talk about a new book start. But we have this book, and we're making a zine version, and we were just talking with Tony Grasso, who's an amazing layout artist, among other things, about basically taking Ethan's words, my words, and Ethan's art, and then what do you how do we bring it to life professionally? So very fun talking about different styles of patterns and what sort of would go with this kind of very specific high fantasy, retro fantasy, but there's cars and lots of skeletons, and it's its own little world. So I like the idea of scrungles for that.
Little guys. Yeah, Marginalia is just chock full of little guys. Little snails, little rabbits with axes. It's the original sort of conceit with SK was sort of like realizing that those beautiful, handsome marginalia that you find in illuminated manuscripts, there's just no distance between them and like the malingering doodles that you do in the margins of like a high school book. There's no difference. Just of material and time and style and use case. So lots of differences, but ultimately coming from the same sort of like spirit and trying to find bridges between like a practice that is so old, between decades, is sort of like this idea of retro fantasy, without it being like super duper defined. But I like the idea of making new marginalia and just throwing it in there.
Yeah, I think like to Ethan's earlier point, one of the things that I've been like super zoned in on in terms of like noticing out in the world, and trying to like pick apart and mine for resources is just other layout stuff, other books. There's I don't the author isn't coming to mind right away, but there was a relatively recent like Wonderland. I think it's a setting guide. I don't think it in itself is a system, but I think is just like a Alice in Wonderland inspired big like setting tome. I can't speak to the quality of the writing. I'm sure it's great, but graphically it is awesome. It is a beautiful book to flip through and to look at. And so I've been trying to like scour stuff for like what makes good game layout, which is different from what makes good like novel layout or good graphic novel layout or good even it's somewhat it's more akin to like editorial stuff like magazines and in a lot of ways that I think are important, but then there's certain things that we're like, well, not necessarily. It like kind of straddles the line between being like a textbook and a magazine in a lot of ways. I think where you fall on that kind of defines the usability, the readability of what you're putting together.
Yeah, I think that a lot of game books are very handsome and very pretty. I think that a lot of them in general, in terms of their actual utilitarian like objectness as a guide is often wanting. I think or sometimes if the utilitarianness of it shines and then it winds up being something, I don't know, not super pretty, which in some cases, if you're trying to make something look brutalist, is a really great thing to lean into. But I think that like the stylization of something that you use to parse information from. I mean, there are so many examples of just atrocious textbooks out there. Just like some of them, like I remember, like in undergraduate reading things, and it's like, wow, this science textbook is brilliant. And then sometimes you're just sort of like, I want to go back in time and track down the scientist who worked with the design team for like 8 shillings to put this together. I just want to talk to him. Just want to talk to him for reasons.
And I think that's some of it. I think sometimes that is the charm where you're like, no artist looked at this. This was just a guy who plays with beakers and math and is a science wizard, but is not like a it has no graphical eye, no eye. And it like it's not a moral judgment.
Let the printmaker do your job.
Yeah. So like when he wants to put a book together, what does he do? Well, he just kind of scraps it together in Microsoft Word and pushes it out to the printer.
Bless any scientist or researcher out there who winds up learning how to code in LaTeX. Their stuff winds up looking glorious, and everyone else is just like, oh God, yep, you sure did teach me about something, but why? At the cost of what? My sanity? I found that like with game stuff, like in terms of the categories and subcategories and being able to parse, like for me, I have found cookbooks to be the best source of little nuggets of design wisdom. Their cookbooks are usually designed to be gigunda, but outside of sizing issues, like all that ideas of how to organize information with a bunch of submenus and sub-submenus, cookbooks really knock it out of the park because their audience is the lay audience, unless they're like modernist cuisine, in which case, oh my God.
Yeah, although the book Modernist Cuisine is
a the book is gorgeous.
Of like, it's the size of a doghouse, and it just has so much weird stuff in it. It's one of these like just objects that you're like, what am I looking at? It's so different from the typical cookbook. But I think like RPG books, cookbooks are luxuries. You don't really need them to cook, right? I mean, I don't think most people who know how to cook use them one-to-one that much. They're more like things that sit on the shelf that look pretty that you might flip through for inspiration. And I think the same with GMing and playing RPGs. Like, you have your favorite games you play, you might run something one time as written-ish, but like generally they're more kind of reference and inspiration. So I think in that sense they are very similar, Ethan. They're kind of beautiful, big books that are kind of expensive, and they're meant to be objets d'art. They're meant to sort of sit on the shelf and be really worth the money in terms of like long term. Like they're sort of evergreen. You can always go back to them and be like, wow, this is like a cool recipe for vegan samosas that I just missed, and I wouldn't have thought of or don't know how to do. Let me practice it. And the same, you go back to a book from when people hate on, but the 80s, 90s, big books with lots of math, it's like you'll find some table in something that's just like beautiful, like interesting, well written, and you're like, wow, I'm glad that I have this like otherwise kind of unreadably dense, insane, yet another fantasy game book. So I think we're trying to do better than that, obviously, but I agree. I think there's something to the design that's really a balancing act with the illustration. I think the difference is with food art, it's almost all about photography. And here we don't use photography hardly at all. There are games that do, although they do tend to be the minority, right? Most games are using illustration. So I think it's interesting to kind of think about that is almost really similar to making a good cookbook. Just instead of photos of food, it's whatever the hell you guys are trying.
It's very your standard, really. It's your classic topsy-turvy, sort of slightly melancholy looking doll, dripping monster mask, sentient rat. It's all very standard, really.
Check. Yeah, just classic fantasy tropes. So yeah, no, I think that's interesting, and I think I guess one way to ask a question, and it's funny, we may have covered some of this terrain before, but it's interesting having both of you on multiple times. It's like, how do you square that circle as illustrators and knowing that the book is going to be designed, whether generally, like Tony, you're the one at this point kind of doing that graphic design work, or Ethan, you and I are working with someone else, in this case Tony or Gay, to kind of do the graphic design work. Like, does that affect illustration? Does that lead you to do it differently? Or does it not really factor in? That's just like a separate step that's always after you have fun drawing this terrifying scene of this child being eaten by this goblin.
It's just, I don't know which is worse. If this goblin is sniffing this doll's hair, that's probably worse than if it's trying to eat it.
Well, then we'll say that he's just eating then.
Just eating the. He wants the hair. Just eating the hair. Oh no, cotton candy hair. It's the worst thing you can have in a toy kingdom. Just awful. I love this sort of mix of, just side note. Tony, I love your mix of cute and grotesque. It is really, I love it very much so. My sibling and I are both artists and illustrators, and we talk often about how they want to make something disturbing and it comes out cute, and then I make something cute and it always comes out disturbing. And I feel like you have found the marriage between the two.
Not intentionally. I think I struggle to make things cute, but I think my time in Blister Critters, and maybe to tie it into kind of Wythe's question, is because Blister Critters is supposed to be a cartoon, and we have talked in the past about how there's been times where I think the style skews maybe too realistic, too anatomically correct, so that it's no longer super cute and kind of just vaguely cartoony, and then pushing it to where it is now, to where it is way more cartoony, and that is the focus. There's times where it depends. For me specifically, I think it depends on where my responsibilities lie on a project. If my job is to just lay it out, then the way I lay out and everything else is kind of driven by the artwork. For DM, for Danse Macabre, where I'm doing a little bit of both. I'm following Chris's lead in terms of the style and tone, but because I'm doing illustrations for layout, I'm doing the filigree and the capitals and stuff like that. They kind of go hand in hand, where I think in some ways a lot of the weight, at least in the way that I know that as the Stillfleet was put together, it was mostly written and then illustrations were done for it. And I'd never worked that way. Blister Critters has never worked that way. Maybe for the better, but or for the better or for the worse, I guess, depending in terms of efficiency or the way a project should be managed. I do the illustration work and the layout kind of at the same time, which works when it's my book, but would not work necessarily for other things where it's kind of a tag team endeavor.
Yeah,
well, we ran into it with Stillfleet, Ethan, where we were
oh yeah,
so we've done it different ways. We've done it where the layout led, which I don't think makes as much sense personally, but that is kind of how the core rulebook actually was laid out. It was almost laid out first.
I mean, it got done. So
yeah, it got done. But I think when we do it again, it's much more. We have art and we have writing, and then phase 3 basically is okay, then someone lays it out, and we don't know what the layout is necessarily before then, because you run into a lot of jams where you're oh, there's no room for this illustration, or there's no room for this text, or it sort of doesn't fit as well, which was also a product of having too many words and not knowing how many illustrations we needed. So Ethan and I were kind of guessing, which led to
the protean stage.
Yeah.
No, it's tricky. I think that I think these days I am much more aligned with the idea of whatever the workflow winds up needing to be to work for a specific project, as long as it's defined, then it all turns out Gucci. It's sort of getting to that point of defining what, not necessarily just what the roles are, because I think part of that is the challenge of finding out sometimes just through trial and error, or for doing it a few times, that that information is not self-evident. By that I mean, is it design forward or art forward, or art writing forward, or is it a tag team? Does design necessarily come out of the vibes, or is the design sort of something that is just done to fit a page? There's so many different possible ways of making something, and I do think ultimately those forms wind up influencing it. I think for me personally, with art in general, now that I'm doing I'm finishing up the location illustrations for Danse Macabre, and I think for that project specifically, just because of the sheer quantity and the deadline of it, I was very happy that Chris had already sort of per my request figured out what general FPO sizing things were going to be, and that allowed me to sort of front load, and I set up all of the aspect ratios of the files ahead of time and labeled them. And it's sort of silly, but that process can actually be a huge stumbling block for me with ADHD. So I like set all of that stuff up ahead of time, and then I'm able to focus entirely on doing the concept art, the second round, like the finalization, like all the stuff that, like, you know, I can imagine there being a more freewheeling style, but that would be more just sort of like if the layout is happening like later, or if it's much more of a more Borgia design. So it's like that, but because of like the deadlines and the schematic and everything, having that information ahead of time just meant the whole process was so much easier. I actually started right after doing that with Danse Macabre, with my own, because I've got just an unbelievable, just stupid amount of digital sketches and personal sketches. I'm hypergraphic, so it's just all the time. And I actually started going back and reformatting them to, like, I don't know, depending on the aspect ratio, I started like, you know what, I'm thinking about the final use case. I'm going to be posting this on the web, or I want to print it. And like the simple act of making a decision of like, this is going to be film ratio, or this one's going to be A5, or blah, 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 blah. It actually wound up like chilling me out a little bit, because the problem with a page in a digital age is that it's infinite. Like, it can be any size you want, any level of complexity, and shared with anybody for any use case. So sometimes even just giving yourself a limitation can be very, like, sanifying, is that a word? Very, very clarifying. Makes the process easier.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like having some guidelines to work within, given that the things that you can create are infinite. And I think also, like, after doing so many projects, you almost start to learn like what sizes of things are actually the most useful, just in terms of their usability,
Totes.
like as marketing, but then also like, am I doing this big enough that it's only usable on Instagram, or can I actually put this in the book? And realistically, it should work the other way around. You should be doing stuff for the book to use for marketing, and not stuff just for marketing. Like in terms of like, I guess people could do whatever they want, but if you want advice on how to spend your time in a reasonable way, don't do stuff that is purely for marketing. Do stuff that's going to be in the book, and then find a way to market it.
Well, we have a question from Taylor, hey Taylor, and also hey Michael, thanks for joining us. We have a couple fellow artists in the chat. So Taylor asks, I'd imagine that a Kickstarter model also makes it hard to predict your workflow, like you can't entirely bet on the scale of your project before you start. And that is a question I can speak to at least a little, because I think that is a question of kind of the business model and where you're at. Because if you're a hobbyist, yeah, I mean, it can be really hard. If you're like, I have a thing in mind, I'm going to do a certain amount of writing or art, and then you're, let's say, selling really well and you want to add more stuff, then you can bite off more than you can chew. And we've done that a few times, mostly just in terms of one project that's just behind, but it is happening. The Hulk Crawl cards, which we're finally kind of hoping by the end of the year will go out to print, I should say. So get to backers belatedly, but not, crazy in game terms. We've been on time with everything else. So that definitely happens, where you can kind of say, oh, this won't be that hard. It's only X number more illustrations. It's only Y number more words to write. And then it's like, oh no, this is actually like, exponentially more. It's like add some zeros. And that is somewhat a matter of experience, but also certain genres of thing are easier to predict. Like, we mostly make books, so it's kind of easier, I think, for the three of us to align in like the number of pieces that go in a book and the number of pages and such, at least for letter A5, sort of standard sizes. But then other products like have their own weird life cycles. If they're not books, they might be, you have to do some kind of 3D rendering or something else. So I think there is an aspect to that. And then some of it is just, like trying to force the issue at a certain scale, where you have to go in with a really good game plan of like what could ever make money, like what's a good product to make, like what do people want in the abstract, regardless of the Kickstarter, which is scary because you obviously want to make money in the Kickstarter, but you're kind of committing as a business to like, well, we're going to print a bunch of these anyway. So there's kind of minimum, we're going to print 1,000 of them anyway. So they have to be good. We have to do the art. We have to write it. So I think that's like a different way of thinking about it than the sort of hobbyist level, where you're entirely like, I'll do whatever I get paid to do. Now that we're in retail, it's like we're trying to keep, like with a product launch like Danse Macabre, it's a whole game. So it's not just one book. It's like 4 products that we're like putting out. And I think with Blister Critters, that was a real interesting leveling up, Tony, where you and I had to really think about, we did scale back. As I recall, we did cut some things, but we did end up doing, not just the main the box, which has the book in it. You can get the book separately, but also like the producer screen. So we did a GM screen that has a bunch of character sheets. It wasn't a ton of work extra, but it was like, oh shit, we're designing a new product we've never done. Like we've never done a
Yeah.
screen. It is different. The character sheets, obviously we've done character sheets. They look nice, but like, it's just another thing to proof. So it adds time, not necessarily because of just numbers of words or numbers of illustrations, but from like learning a new skill or proofing a new type of thing. I don't know, Tony or Ethan, if you want to add to sort of how do you predict workflow, and how do you have you sort of leveled up in terms of predicting how long things take?
Well, I had to sort of go through a pretty. Hold on 1 second.
I'll say that I have not figured out how to properly judge how long a thing will take. Even between like the same project, one illustration might take just a random number, like an hour or two, but a different illustration will take 5. Some of that is like a thing that can be leveled up. Like I definitely get faster the longer that I do stuff like in a given project. But then like again, some layout stuff I figure out right away and it doesn't take me that long. I do think I don't know if this is unique to me, but I feel like I'm especially bad about like fiddling with like a specific piece or like a graphical element that is supposed to be like an ongoing rule. I'll just fiddle with it up until the very end, and that absolutely adds time to everything. I have a hard time just being like, that's the final version, because a week later I'll be like, but it could look better. So then I just keep spending an extra 2 hours on something that like you lose time. It's just like a sunken cost, but also a diminishing returns, I think, is the better way to put it. Where it's like you can spend 4 hours on a piece that's going to look as good as it did 3 hours in.
Yeah, there's honestly, I mean, there's just no way to tell sometimes, especially when it's new information. Like, if you're trying to sort of like, challenge yourself to do something fun and interesting each time, and I think Tony, you and I are the same way. Like, we're trying to entertain ourselves, we're trying to push ourselves a little bit.
Yeah.
That can it's tough because like I don't know, for me the biggest like change is sort of like a rough kind of like shift is like I injured my arm. I think it was just occupational stress a few months ago, and it was a really long road for me. I thought it was tennis elbow for months. It turns out it was a stuck nerve, which is way easier to treat. But it's still like it was a lot of time out to like go to physiotherapy and a lot of time to like, and so suddenly for the first time in my life, there was actually a clock. There was like a heat meter, like from gaming perspective, like on, well, if I'm getting into the yellow, I have to stop. Because otherwise I'm going to injure myself again. And that actually happened a couple of times with jobs, because it's like you just gotta, you gotta keep working.
Yep.
But like I like was fortunate in that like I had scheduled a vacation specifically like to like I didn't bring a sketchbook. I like brought books. Honestly, it was like the longest I had gone without drawing in like a long time. And it was really interesting mentally. But like now I'm at a point where there's actually like a real limitation, which I didn't have before, in terms of how many hours I can work. And I always had sort of a hard out, like energy wise, because of my like autoimmune condition. But like with that, like now there's like 2 limitations, and it's like, oh shit, there's actually. I'd like to say it helped me simplify my work, but that's a lie. To your point, Tony. I'm still sort of like trying to figure out what it means in terms of like style. If I were sane and reasonable, and I think I'm finally sort of like buying what my brain is trying to sell me, there are certain ways to simplify a process or tone it down without like that last 3 hours of fiddling. Which that last 3 hours of fiddling is wonderful and sweet and delicious and should be done if it's possible. But like ultimately for like something with a due date, oftentimes it's not necessary. So that has sort of like been a big and rather recent shift. And honestly, like it's coming out fine. It's not really, it doesn't affect the work terribly. But
Yeah,
just sort of understanding that our bodies have limits.
Also, the diminishing returns thing is also a function of a team, because if you're a hobbyist working on your own, or you're hiring contractors whom you don't know that well, you do feel like, I think more rightfully, you feel more anxiety around the quality control. Whereas I think if you have a team you can rely on, you can kind of backstop things and be like, well, we have a professional editor who's going to like do a pass. So I'm going to edit it really closely, but also like I have to sleep, to Ethan's point. So,
Oh man, I lean super hard on the rest of the team for my writing. I'm just tapping away like a monkey, and I'm like, at some point in the process, this will get sorted out. I'll leave a few typos in to give Wythe something to do. But
yeah, I gotta earn the money I have not paid myself yet. Yeah, no, it's no, exactly. It's part of the fun of having a team is then you can work with a team and go back and forth. And I've been, I mean, even to shout out, Michael with Enter the Nostalgiatron, it was fun to work with. It's always fun to work with new folks, but not everyone is as sort of meticulous and ready to dive in and compromise and like forge solutions immediately and just move on. So I think that's part of what makes a good team is people who can kind of listen to each other, give feedback, take feedback, and just like see the bigger picture without getting too lost in the sauce, to y'all's point, on any one quarter page hello that eventually is like half buried by text. And so it's not that it's not an amazing illustration. Obviously you can see on screen you guys are pretty good at this, but it's more like, what is it doing for a book, and can we keep making these books? And if we spent 100 hours on each illo or each paragraph, we would, you just never publish anything. So
yeah, and it's tough. I think like in terms of illustration, it's like, let's be real here. It's a punishing industry in the sense that rates haven't increased in, I don't know, 50, 60 years at this point. AI is now this horrible like gremlin that's just making people act like crazy people.
Boo,
it's just like, so there's this antisocial sort of like hyper capitalist thing that's like happening also. So like there's already that challenge, and so there's a lot of competition in the market, and so you are always kind of in the mindset of like, well, this thing isn't like the next Mike Mignola, so let me just throw in the towel, or I've got to really push myself to get to that next level to blah blah blah, and then you wind up burning out, or you get older and you're still there, and it's like, okay, well, that's not being able to just sort of have tunnel vision is really, really challenging, but it's super duper important because like each project, all that matters is that project. And you're always sort of like, in terms of improving yourself, you are always sort of looking to the future. It's really, really hard to do, but it's super important for like staying like sane and happy while you're working on projects. If it doesn't turn out like, a 19th century book, like, lithograph, it's like, oh, we'll get it next time. And in the meantime, I learned X, Y, and Z, and I think it's really good for A, B, C. Like, you kind of have to fluff yourself up a little bit, or like pump yourself up a little bit about the things that you did accomplish, with like the mindset that like, cool, I've learned all this stuff, and then the next one's going to be even better.
I think I struggle with putting it down. Yeah, I struggle with the end part of that. I'm like, yeah, I know it doesn't have to be perfect, but
like, I know objectively, but what if it was?
But what if it was? What if I spent the extra 4 hours? Like I don't think it's unique to me, but there's definitely times where like I'll be working on any number of the projects, and it'll be like, all right, well, it's 10 o'clock. I can probably put the pencil down. I'm like, but if I spent another hour, I bet I could figure this out. I bet I could solve it. And like, all right, well, now it's 11 o'clock. I still haven't fixed it. Well, I'll get there. And then it'll be 2 a.m. and I'm like, I hate it. I didn't fix it. I actively made it worse. And now I have screwed my sleep up for the next couple of days. And it is like a micro aspect of like diminishing returns where I'm like, I could have just went to bed. I should have just went to bed, but should have put the pencil down. I would have woken up and been like, that's fine. Let me do something different now.
I mean, live and learn. And besides, like that,
But I'm not. I keep doing it. I'm not. I'm not learning.
You'll learn.
Tony, this is an intervention.
Yeah, you learned something in the process. Like, I don't know. We've all been there with every project. Like, it's just sort of like, I gotta just do, and then
yeah.
But like at the very least, that even if it like got hosed or it didn't work out, like, I don't know, your XP is still keeping track. Like it is moving up despite it like maybe coming out be like lackluster or whatever. Energy management's a huge problem.
And some stuff you come back to, and so the different people have different energies. Like, I'm a night owl, but I also have a day job, so I try to balance that because I'm now in my 40s, so I can't really stay up till 5 a.m., go to work the next day, and like do that. So it's like, it's a question of, sometimes it is nice to stay up late and bang something out, and sometimes it's not exactly the thing I should be doing in terms of deadlines, and I know I need to then like, okay, now I have even less time to do the thing that is actually due. But it's fun because it's like, oh, well, this will be something eventually, or there's something here. And to y'all's point, you have to see the the kernel of like, okay, I've done some kind of game design that's useful, that's interesting, even if it's not what I needed to do because I have to write this press release and it's not written, whatever.
Right.
And I think there's probably some of that with any, whether it's a design or illustration. It's like you can have fun doing something that might actually make it into a book. It's just like, okay, you also have deadlines, some of which are harder, some of which are softer, and then all of us, like you said, have sort of energy levels and health issues and different sorts of day jobs or other commitments, family. So these are all like Michael said, it's a balancing act. You have to serve yourself, as an artist, as well as the specific project, and make sure the project is, of course, top quality. But right, what does that mean? There's also just the issue of like, it'll never be done. Like, you'll never think it's perfect, and as soon as you publish it, you'll be like, oh, I could have done at least some minor aspect of it better. I will say the good stuff, for me at least, perhaps selfishly, is pretty evergreen. Like the Stillfleet core rulebook, Blister Critters. I think these are projects that, like, when I look at them, even if I spot a very minor sort of typo or like inconsistency in the lore in my head, I'm like, yeah, it still works. Like, I think in 2.0, the powers will be a little bit streamlined, or there'll be things we rejigger, but it's not the kind of thing where I feel like, oh man, I really missed the mark. It feels like, oh yeah, we did it to like as high a percentile effort as we could have in terms of quality, and then eventually moved on because it's like it's only one thing, and it only we could only have so much reach. So we sort of, the people who wanted it got it. It's high quality, and then at some point we had to decide, okay, are we going to do that again with a new game, essentially, or just kind of do versions of the same thing over and over. We have another question in the chat, so to switch a little bit to the sort of professional side, we've been touching on it, but specific question: could your drawing skills transfer over to a job like a courtroom artist or police sketch artist? So, or just in general, I guess, what other jobs do you have to be really, really good at? Like, someone says something or you see something and you can immediately do that, because like I can't do that. I mean, it's kind of amazing to watch. But what do you guys think?
That's super interesting. In thinking about myself as a court sketch artist, I immediately thought of a scene from Adventure Time where they're trying to reproduce a bunch of bizarre looking vampires, and it's Jake talking to the police sketch artist, being like, yeah, there was one of them who looked like somebody's wet uncle. Nah, that's not right. There was one if it looked like if a baby snake was a baby. Nah, that's not right. On a loop with everything. It's really funny. I feel like this is actually something that I was thinking about recently. Like, I am, in terms of like anatomy, really, really great. Professionally, on a day-to-day basis, because of the kinds of art that I do and deadlines and a whole bunch of other things, I wind up not using it very much, except in the perfunctory manner of setting up a figure. And if I had to sit down and do it according to somebody's explanation or in a courtroom, it probably would wind up coming out like they're like, Ethan, you're fired. Stop drawing like everybody as like, sexy robots. I'll be like, all right, fine, whatever, it's your loss. I don't know if that would
like of sexy robots committing crimes.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, I mean, if my beat, like if my police precinct was in like the robot red light district, I'd be all set. I think that like illustration is very particular as an art form. I think art skills in general are highly translatable to other professions, because you always need to ideate or schematicize or like envision a concept in a way that's like super weird. I think it's super handy if you're in something like engineering, because you can visualize stuff very strongly. In terms of like the actual act of drawing, I'm not so sure that it translates well outside of the arts. I think it did up until relatively recently in the late 20th century. And then a whole bunch of tech stuff happened, and it's like, I don't know, a lot of it's superfluous now. So to answer your question, I personally couldn't do it. I can envision somebody who is better at quick drawing people, or like capturing expressiveness of people could totally do something like that. I myself would wind up probably getting arrested along with the people that I was trying to like draw.
Yeah, I think I agree with Ethan in a lot of ways. I think that maybe before the past 10 years, maybe 20 years, I think that there were more ways that you could use your, not even just illustration skills, but just like being a creative, like a visually creative person in general, I think had more applications that weren't taken over by a robot. I think at this point, like there would have been a point where someone's whole job was to do everything that the one person goes to Canva for. like within like any office building, or like I think the tools are just there for people to not need a creative person, and I think to the detriment of everybody in the world, things just don't look as nice. Like
Yeah.
because there isn't an artist in charge of making the office, I don't know, poster or the flyer. Like I think that those things look less nice, and so less people enjoy them. Or like for any number of things, I think that because Canva does it, and it is done by a person who, like, I don't know, not to throw a whole bunch of shade, but like isn't a creative person, or it doesn't have like a trained eye. It just comes out looking shoddy, and like it gets the information across. People still show up to the potluck, but like the world would be a lot prettier if artists were still relied upon. And I think that's good in some ways and bad in others. I think it's overall a net negative that artists have less applications.
Yeah, it's the hubris of I think not. I don't think this is like there's a type of person that is like this, but it's like I think I feel like I constantly am harping on this. Like it always winds up coming back to like law and economics. It's if since we don't enforce our monopoly laws in America, and we are letting people sort of essentially illegally like train stuff on a bunch of shit. It's this sort of general idea of like, oh, we don't need that because it's superfluous labor. We're going to allow this so that like because we've legally somehow allowed a few companies to like dominate the stock market and the economy and everybody, literally like actually dominate us now. I think that finding ways to bring art back to the world, it's tricky because like making money off of it has always been challenging, but it is one of the best ways to like increase the amount of art in the world is to pay money dollars for it, and then it exists. But it's like if the powers that be do not need, like, or want it, then you wind up having really boring looking McDonald's. I mean, it's depressing. Like a modern McDonald's is just like, it's just cheaper. They've made it cheap McDonald's. There's no charm. There's no fun. They've decided that fun is actually not important for selling a hamburger, which I find shocking, to be honest. I guess the hope is that like they're training people to not need fun, or something. It seems like they'd sell more hamburgers if the building that you sell the hamburgers in has a giant, like, sentient hamburger head coming out of it that you can like put your friends in like it's a jail. I feel like that's just a tried and true understanding of economics.
Well, and this is not just AI. This is also just mass culture shifting, which it's shifted before, and also very, very recently in historical times. But I'm not saying that means it's good or will all be okay. But just this is not new. That like there used to be hand cut signs that were not that well made, frankly, that said like you can buy shoes here. It's a shoe store, right? And now Nike advertises itself as not even a company, obviously not about shoes, but not even about sports. It's more about like becoming oneself to the like grinding and hustling. Like it's like a different metaphor of like what they're selling you when you purchase expensive sneakers. And I think that has happened in about really like the blink of an eye, 100 years, 150 years, right? In terms of kind of how culture has taken signs and words and they've proliferated. So most people now can read to some degree, and that might be on the decline again. They're seeing just symbols constantly. There's iconography all around them. And so I think to your point about Ethan, it's like it used to be there was some kind of whimsical person who was the creative, who's like giant hamburger head, ball pit. What do kids want? Let's bring kids in, get them young, and like that was cynical, and it was to sell kind of bad meat products, but it also was fun. And as kids, I went to the ball, like I liked the ball pit. I liked, oh, there's a scary hamburger clown. This is a terrifying place. He has like a big like purple gumdrop man who's gonna rob me or something. Like the whole lore of McDonald's is insane. But nowadays it's like you can't even come up with this stuff. It seems like it's all sort of computer generated, overly produced, right? In Hollywood terms, it's like groups of people looking at markets and saying, how can we capture the market in such and such a place? How do we sort of bring in all of the things that have worked according to ad models, according to some marketing database, and it doesn't seem to have that charm or elegance or human touch, or the word would be, I think in social studies, like enchantment, right? It's not enchanted by like a human artist who's like giant hamburger heads. Those are just fucking weird. Kids will like it because kids like weird, gross stuff. So I think I'm not saying it's all over. It just does feel like we're at the low point, like The Empire Strikes Back, in terms of culture, where like corporations control all this stuff. It's hard to do indie business. It's very, very hard, it turns out, financially, and and it is hard. It's hard to leave your stamp as an artist. Not impossible, and we're trying to do it, but and lots of other people are. But it definitely feels like, yeah, when we turn on the TV, just the ads were served. There, Gay and I talk about this all the time because we work in advertising, and we both have paid attention to ads our whole lives. Her in Thailand, me in the U.S. And like ads today in the U.S. are just not as good. Like they're not as funny. They're not as creative. And it does feel like there's kind of been this general dumbing down of creative arts because of kind of monopolization, oligopolization. So I definitely agree. There's something there to that metaphor of like, why doesn't McDonald's feel wacky, and why does it feel like it's trying to be fast casual? It's trying to be Dig In and Chipotle. Like they're all trying to be the same global. Anyone from anywhere could come here and be like generic, unoffensive hamburger place. Which like no, at the end of the day, it's like everything is kind of mediocreized, if you know what I mean, in some ways. So I think partially that's why a lot the time we talk about weirdness and elegance too, like trying to really nail certain, like you said, 19th century children's book, or 1390s, like very specific grisaille, going to the low point of French culture, the Ottoman takeover in the East, and it's like very specific visual references, just because. Well, it won't be AI design slop, right? It'll be something else if we do.
It'll be something.
Something.
Yeah, well, it's funny. It's like I have to remind myself constantly that I feel like I'm so cussed. Like honestly, it doesn't matter. If, like I don't know. I'll never use a stupid robot to do stupid drawing, because the day I need a robot to do that, I might as well go do HVAC stuff, which has always been my kind of backup plan. People always need ventilation. No, I think that like I have to remind myself that like sometimes, like I found myself the other day getting wistful about mass culture, and I'm like, Ethan, you hate mass culture. You've always hated it, and I know it's been replaced with nothing, and that's part of the problem. But at the same time, like I remember how hard it was to like do weird things and be weird and dress weird and make weird stuff, like back in the 90s and 2000s. It was never easy. Like maybe I don't know. I'm not saying that there's a silver linings playbook, but like. I don't know. Maybe there's an opening now for people to sort of like rediscover charm, because it'll be gone. Like, and robots produce shit. I don't know. I have to remind myself that it's like it is not totally over. Throw in the towel. It is very challenging mentally to go against the grain, because there are lots of people who are being paid money to say on the internet that it is over, and just give in to the robot. It can be hard to sort of steel yourself against that.
And that was true in the high poster era, when German and French artists were like smoking opium, and like being gay and like doing posters, and people were like, what is this expressionist insanity? Like, I just want a sign shaped like a shoe that says I sell shoes. Like, I don't want this weird asymmetric crazy color, And so I think to your point, it's always been hard to leave your stamp on the world. It may be harder in different eras, and it probably was harder actually 150 years ago for like base economic reasons. Like there is somewhat of a middle class still in the US, however harmed, it's like we do have we have for now, exactly, but we have StreamYard, Adobe, whatever, we can make books and sell them. So it's not impossible to do a small business. It's hard to make money, but it's sort of like it's a thing you could do if you want to torture yourself. On that,
you hate yourself and you want to do it.
No. If you want to hang out with your friends and this is how you want to spend your weekends.
And make cool stuff. I think we have to remember ultimately, as a final thought, if we're trying to do something creative, we at all times have to be selling the banner of weird and creative. Like, it is not a given anymore. We have to like get people out of their comfort zones and like to try something that isn't Dragon Game. It's like because moral reasons, and you're a better person if you buy every single one of our products, Dan.
That's right, the hard moral pitch, Ethan. Well, on that note, on that very, very subtle note, thanks a lot, Ethan Gouldini and Anthony Grasso, as always, for joining us. We have a Blister Critters announcement coming soon, zine that's going to be available very, very shortly. I just need to get up the digital side of it, but that's off to print. So new Blister Critterage. We're working on the first Sometimes Kingdom RPG print product. That'll also, of course, be available as a PDF. You can get free quick starts for both those games now. And we're all working on Danse Macabre Medieval Horror Roleplaying, which will go live on Kickstarter October 7th. Again, there's a free quick start. It is now a little out of date with the current rules, because the rules are really, really written. It's a big, beautiful, not a big book. It's a 200-page A5 book, so still much shorter than, a big book. But it's very full system and setting, has everything you need, and we're doing these companion volumes, so other settings, including with Michael Cohen in the chat, so shout out again. Major thanks to Michael, Taylor, anyone who's asking questions. GZDR Forev, Geezer Doctor Forev. Thanks for questions, and we really appreciate anyone who watches the stream, asks questions, because as you hear, we're just trying to figure it out ourselves. So happy to share what we can, and also look at this bizarre stuff. I don't know, guys. It does make me think. I don't think we usually share these in any form, but maybe we can start kind of posting on social at least the fruits of your labors. When you,
I like
believe
that idea.
Michael let
you do
us.
this. Yeah.
I saved the PSD last time. It's the same file.
Okay.
I'll tool around and see. I mean, we can obviously export it as a PNG and share it that way, but maybe
Yeah.
there's some fancier stuff that I can also do with it.
Well, fancy or not, let's talk offline with Gay and just share some of y'all's work, because it's really cool, and I think it'll be fun to kind of have a record of, like, this time you guys, for some reason, drew this cyclopean purple man with a hammer attacking Ethan's mech. All right, so with that, we got to wrap. Thanks, everyone who tunes in. We'll do this every couple weeks. I think maybe not next time, the time after, Taylor Z will be our special guest, so shout out.
Awesome sauce.
And yeah, we're always, again, if you're a collaborator, we're always happy to have you on, and if you're a friend, and if you like weird games and cool stuff. So have a wonderful Sunday. Till next time.
All right, y'all. Later.
Peace.
Bye.